Hello, this is Professor Angelia with Part 6 of Healing Families' Lives Child Development and Psychology class. Last time we left off talking about moral development, and we're going to jump right back into that. Moral development depends in part upon children's increasing understanding of the difference between right and wrong within the context of society's conventions. They need to appreciate that there are rules for governing behavior and there are reasons for such rules to keep everybody safe. They also need an appreciation of the fact that other people have thoughts and feelings and that their own actions may have consequences for others, because children are very, self-centered, and they don't realize that things they do affect other people. In addition, they need to develop inhibiting feelings of guilt and remorse after doing the wrong thing, so that'll make them want to do the right thing. There are various theories about how children develop moral reasoning. One by Piaget, 1932, concluded that children up to 4 years old have no systematic understanding of rules or the reasons for rules. So if you're expecting your toddler to grasp, the higher thinking of why a rule is and why it's important, you're going to be disappointed because they're not able to do that yet. Between the ages of 4 and 7 or 8, rules are seen as absolute and unchangeable. And I'm going to have to pause for a second. Oh, sorry about that. Let's see. Yeah, and game more such. Okay. The rules are seen as absolute and unchangeable and laid down by a higher authority, usually their parents. Hopefully, you're putting some rules down there for your kids. It's how they learn to follow them. The amount of damage, rather than the intent behind the action, judge the seriousness of an action according to their minds. So, by this reasoning, a child would consider that it is worse to accidentally break 3 cups than to deliberately break 1, because they don't understand the idea of intent yet. To them, the damage done, is worse than, the intent, whereas we know that if you purposely do something, that's worse than accidentally doing something. They do not appreciate either difference between deliberate and accidental actions. By the age of 5, children have an internal critical voice, but because of their lack of self-control, they still require adult supervision, which prevents misbehaving. At this stage, it is crucial that children receive constant and appropriate messages of approval and disapproval. Otherwise, they have nothing on which to base their own conscience. You're the one that teaches them how to have a conscience or their development. So you're developing a conscience in them when you teach them. And that's what discipline should be, teaching them. From about the age of 9, children begin to realize that people make rules and, in certain circumstances, these can be changed. So they learn that if they can talk you out of it, they can maybe change the rules. And this is where, their feeling of empowerment comes from. A group of children, for example, may decide to change the rules of a game that they might be playing. Something's not working for everybody or not going to where, so they might change things so that it can be better. They also exhibit a clearer understanding of the importance of intent rather than outcome for judging the seriousness of an action. So they start to understand it was how you felt about that versus, just the damage done. They understand that if you meant to do it, that's worse than if you accidentally did it. If someone means well or didn't mean to do it, their wrongdoing is seen as less serious than if they did it on purpose. Children sift judgments based on the rules or norms of a group to which they belong. When the chosen reference group defines as good or right is right or good in the child's view. And that's why the people around children affect them. Children learn what they live, the saying goes. That's true. What they grow up around is what they're going to take out into the world. They tend to judge things in terms of what gives them pleasure or to their favorite people. Like they might, if their favorite person is grandma, they might mind grandma more than they would mind, the parents or uncle or aunt, Therefore, by the age of 9 or 10, they have the ability to consider alternative possibilities and to image possible outcomes. They can imagine what might happen if I say this or do this. By this age, the sense of right or wrong is normally strong enough to prevent them from misbehaving without adult supervision. Usually, it says. Some children develop mentally and emotionally slower. It depends on the home you come up in. If you come up in a great, super supportive home, you're going to mature faster than if you come up in a home that is not. So accepting you're going to mature slower, and that's just how it is. From then on, conscience continues to be refined and modified as values develop. And so that's how children develop, the values. You teach them. They learn these things from somewhere. It can't just be, poof, into their brain. It doesn't work that way. It'd be great if it did, but it doesn't, Most adolescents move to the level of understanding that there is a need for recognition of law and the need for maintaining order. Because otherwise, society would just be a wreck. If there were no laws, no order, people just be doing whatever they wanted, killing each other, just whatever they wanted. And it would be okay because there was no rules against it. General factors. Factors such as ethnicity, cultural background, disability, early traumatic experiences, sexuality, gender, and individual differences influence these stages of development. And that's just a fact. We're not going to discuss why or what or whatever. This isn't a sociology lesson. These stages are only a rough guide based on research carried out mostly in Europe and North America. The experience of young people from minority cultural communities may differ substantially from those of the majority of North American and English youth. In particular, the widely varying family structures, which are less based upon the notion of a nuclear family, have a major impact on the individual's perceptions of maturity from adolescence to adulthood. Each family member can influence the young person to a degree that is not common amongst majority communities, and the roles and responsibilities of individuals within the wider family unit may be more specifically defined according to such factors as age and gender, for example. Like in a lot of cultures, like an oldest daughter might be expected to take care of the younger children. And she might be carrying a baby around on her hip and she's only, 10 years old. So, in cultures like that, it is going to be different. And then children are expected to mature faster. And that's unfortunate. Developmental tasks of normal adolescence. Adolescents do not progress through these multiple developmental tasks separately. It's all going on at once. At any given time, adolescents may be dealing with several. Further, the centrality of specific developmental tasks varies with early, middle, and late periods of transition. During the early adolescent years, young people make their first attempts to leave the dependent, secure role of a child and to establish themselves as unique individuals. The focus of adolescent self-concepts are thus often on their physical self and their evaluation of their physical acceptability. They're worried about, do people like me? That's a big thing, do people like me? Early adolescence is also a period of intense conformity to peers. They want to fit in and not be different. And being accepted seems somehow pressing to the early adolescent. The worst possibility from their view, and excuse me, I have to pause again. So rude. Sorry about that. And we were talking about early adolescence. The worst thing, according to their point of view, is to be seen by peers as different. Middle adolescence is marked by the emergence of new thinking skills. The intellectual world of the young person is suddenly greatly expanded. Although peers still play an important role in the life of middle adolescents, they are increasingly self-directed. Their concerns about peers are more directed towards their opposite-sexed partners, or same, depends on what their sexuality is going to be. It is also during this period that the move to establish psychological independence from one's parents accelerates. So parents, that's normal. They're supposed to want to get away from you. That's normal. Much of their psychological energies are directed towards preparing for adult roles and making preliminary decisions about vocational goals. And that's why, they have the different vocational schools and programs in high schools, because it's time for them to start thinking about what they're going to do, because the law, even though we know 18-year-olds aren't necessarily adults, the law says they are. So they're going to have to be able to get themselves from point A to point B. They're going to have the money to do so. And they're going to have the skills if they want a specialized job, so they can do that. Despite some delinquent behavior, yes, as we might know, teenagers do occasionally get involved with some delinquent behavior. Middle adolescence is a period during which young people are oriented towards what is right and proper. Excuse me. They are developing a sense of behavioral maturity and learning to control their impulsiveness, because children are very impulsive. You might have noticed that if you're a parent. And teenagers, once they get through the middle teens, once they start to get about 16, 18, they should lose that impulsiveness. They should start thinking about their actions before they take them. Late adolescence is marked by the final preparations for adult roles. The developmental demands of late adolescence often extend into the period that we think of as young adulthood. So if you have someone, a young person in their 20s, and they're lagging behind a little bit, don't worry about that. Everybody develops differently. As long as they are developing, as long as they are, finding how to get from point A to point B, as long as they are getting some money, and trying to have a life of their own, then, don't hate on them. Everyone develops at their own rate. Late adolescents attempt to crystallize their vocational goals and to establish a sense of personal identity. Their needs for peer approval are diminished, and they are largely psychologically independent from their parents. Now, it's good for you to make sure they know that you're a safe base. If they have problems out there, they can always come back home. That there's a place for them in the home, and, they're not out the door once they're 18. The shift to adulthood is nearly complete. And my grandmother told my father one time when he was talking about something about when he was 21 years old, and she said, 21 years do not make a man. And we all thought that was hilarious, but, that is true. Everyone develops at their own rate, and, it's just the way it is. Stage 4 search task. The experimenter hides the object in the first location, whereupon the infant searches successfully. But when the experimenter hides the object at the second location, the infant searches again at the original location. And that was, the thing we talked about earlier, where the, search error. This is something that, infants and toddlers do, and eventually they will grow out of that. Testing 8-month-old's location memory in a non-search A/B task. In the possible event, the object is hidden beyond the right screen and, after a delay, is taken from behind the right screen. In the impossible event, so this is something that is not possible, the object is hidden behind the left screen, but later is taken away from behind the right screen. Will 8-month-olds pay more attention to the impossible event, therefore showing surprise and a knowledge of where the item should have been? And they do that, and they moved it for 15 seconds, and yes, it did attract their attention. Everybody loves a magic trick. If you need 8 months old, they know if that started out there, how did it get to be there? So that's a developmental test that they can do sometimes. Selected items from parental responsivity subscales of the home HOME inventory. Infant toddler version. Parent responds to child's vocalization with a verbal response. And these are things they're looking at. Like if a social worker was to come out and they're watching you, and these are things they're looking for. A parent caresses or kisses the child at least once during the visit. Early childhood version. Parent holds child close 10 to 15 minutes per day. Parent spontaneously praises child's qualities or behavior twice during the visit. Middle childhood version. Parent sometimes yields to child's fears and rituals. For example, allows a nightlight, accompanies a child to new experiences. Parent responds to child's questions during the interview. This is where a lot of people, go wrong because they're shushing the kid. Shh, I'm talking to her. That shows that what that child has to say to you is not important. That should not be the case. That child should come first, and your worker's watching that. That adult stuff is coming before that child. So that child always comes first. And just don't do it for show, do it for real. I need help. Percentage of parents of infants and toddlers reporting a need for assistance in specific areas. And that's the title of this, I wasn't saying that. More time for self. 83.3% of parents of toddlers said they needed that. Time to get in shape. 76.5% of parents of toddlers said they needed that. Help in dealing with stress. 68.8% of parents of toddlers say they needed that. Information about behavioral problems. 60% of parents said they needed that. Someone who can babysit. 58.8% of parents said they needed that. Someone to talk to about child rearing problems. 55.4% of parents said they needed that. Information about child development. 46.5% of parents say they needed it. And that's why I'm doing this. That's why I'm bothering to sit here, tell you all this stuff. So someone who needs it can hear it, hopefully. More time to be with the child, 39.2%. Parents dealing with young children require support and information. Okay, and then we're going to look at subsystems of language. Language is the top. Form, content, and use. The way the language starts to show what's in the language and how they use the language. That's the first step to having language. And then comes syntax, morphology, phonology, semantics, pragmatics. And that's when you get into more complicated ideas of language. And that's why they teach you, in elementary school, we have your vocabulary words and you got to write out the definition, all this stuff. They're teaching you how to use higher language to be able to express yourself in an adult manner. Reports of abused and neglected children. This is starting in 1986, 2,086,000 reports of abused children. In 1990, it goes up to 2,559,000 reports of abused children. In 1995, it goes up to 2,960,000 reports. In 1996, it goes to 3,032,000. So I think you're getting the idea here that there has been a steady increase in the reports of abused children. Now, some people say this is because the reporting is gotten to be better, but it's also the fact that this is happening more. The world is under stress. A lot of people are under stress. Modern life is stressful because the cost of living goes up and up and up, and people's incomes do not go up and up and up. And so the days where, dad worked and mom stayed home with the kids are pretty much gone because people can't afford to do that anymore. You have to have, two incomes coming in just to support, having a roof over your head and food on the table and clothes for your family. So, this causes stress. And if you were brought up in a home where stress was not dealt with properly in a positive manner, then you're also more likely to continue the cycles that you live through. Excuse me. So child abuse remains a serious problem. The source was the National Committee to Prevent Child Abuse and the National Center on Child Abuse and Neglect. Trends in development. Reducing the child abuse rate. Some of the increase may be due to greater public awareness and better reporting methods again. So in millions again, it just went up. And the goal is to have this below 22, percentage. Okay, below 22%. The goal is to have it below 22% of children being abused. Because prior to the 80s, that's where it was. And they'd like to get it back down to that, but I guarantee you, it was definitely being unreported in my day. Most people I went to school with, this kind of thing was happening in their home. So they would like to see it back down to that number, but I'm saying that's not even a realistic number because the number was actually much higher than that prior to the 1980s. Okay, under 5 mortality rate is dropping. Starting in 1960, per 1,000 births, in an industrialized country, you only had 49. And it's gone down to about 3 in every 1,000. And that's in, industrialized countries. Okay, in Latin America and the Caribbean, you have about 160 per 1,000 births. And that has also gone down to below 49. And in 1960 in East Asia and the Pacific Islands, 200 per 1,000 births didn't make it. That has also dropped to about 50. In Middle East and North Africa, it was about 240 per 1,000. And that's dropped to right around 60. And Sub-Saharan Africa, 250 in every 1,000 children didn't make it at birth. And that has dropped to 160. Then South Asia started out right around that 250 and has dropped to 125. So the infant mortality rate has dropped. It's gotten better. And I think prenatal education is big for that. You need to eat right when you're pregnant. You need to not drink alcohol when you're pregnant. You need to stay hydrated when you're pregnant. You need to not smoke and not do drugs, so you can have a healthy baby. Having a child with a developmental disability. Here are things you need to do to take care of your own emotional health first. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of them. And having a child who's different, you're going to face stigma. You're going to face stress because, let's face it, there are going to be more challenges raising this child than there would be with a normal child. And the first thing they teach you in psychology is there's no such thing as normal. It's all a law of averages. This is where your average people fall. Some people fall to this side. Some people fall to this side. So, there's no such thing as normal. It's a law of averages. Number 1, take care of yourself. Take care of your own emotional health first. If you're stressed, if you're having mental problems and you feel like you need to get help, get help. No shame in that. Number 2, observe. Take time to learn about your child's emotional responses to a variety of situations. And that way you can stop trouble before it starts. If you know when you take your child into a crowded thing where there's a lot of noise and they shut down and sit on the ground and hold their ears, then you know you need to not bring that child in a place where there's going to be a lot of noise. Observe your child, learn, how they react to things, and you can head off some trouble for yourself. Number 3, participate in activities that bring your child pleasure. Because, there are things that make your kid happy, and do that with them. Number 4, feelings talk. Put words to your child's feelings, especially if they're on the Asperger's or autism spectrum at all. They might not be able to tell you how they feel about a thing, but you might be able to observe them and tell by the way they're walking, talking, acting, what's going on with them. And then you can say, hey, you look like you're upset. What's going on? Or you look like you're mad. What's going on? And you can bring them out of that and so they can talk to you about what's going on, because sometimes they don't know how to approach that. They don't know how to verbalize that without the prompt. Number 5, praise your child's appropriate behavior. And that's something, we had a chart when they were younger of, bad behaviors, they got a tally, good behaviors, they got a tally. And the bad behaviors, when the tallies added up, that was a problem. You got timeout or, grounding, punishment. And the good tallies add up. Then you got, some allowance or, a pizza party or something, that we decided once you get X amount, this is the good thing's going to happen. Now, I had a little problem because their father didn't cooperate with that. And so that kind of derailed all the good work I was trying to do. But anyway, it's still a great idea to keep up with that and praise their good behavior. Let them know that good behavior does matter, that it is rewarding to behave appropriately. Find out what your child is good at and what is unique about them and capitalize on that. Because that way you're going to help them get further in life. Because people are going to do better at things that they enjoy and they're good at. That's just a fact. And if you can steer that in the direction, no matter if it's not a direction you want for them, it's a direction they're good at. It's what they like. It's not about you. Once that child is in the world and they start doing things, it's about them. It's not about what you want them to be. It's about what they want out of their life. And you guide them in that direction. And, you can cross your fingers. You can pray a lot and say, Lord, let them have what they want. Let them have a good life, and, hopefully, if you've done things is the best you can. That's all that you can do is the best you can. You're only human. But hopefully you can get that child out there into the world and they can become a functional member of society. Number 7, read emotional signs. Respond to your child's dependency needs and assertiveness by knowing when your child needs your warmth and when your child needs you to let him go. Because, sometimes they need you to, get them and keep them safe if they're not feeling so safe. And then sometimes they need you to let them run off and play with their friends. Number 8, keep your interactions at the child's physical and developmental level. And this is something that bothers me about some parents. They think the child should know what they know. And that's just ridiculous. The child cannot know what you know. They're born without even all the connections of their neurons fused yet. They're still developing. So, of course, they don't know what you know. And it's ridiculous to think your child should know something without you or someone else having taught them this. Children are not, a pre-programmed computer born with all the knowledge they're going to need in life. It doesn't work that way. Know when to seek professional help. And that's a big one. If you're just not dealing with this very well, it's okay. It's okay to seek professional help. There's no shame in that. The shame is letting a dilemma continue in your household, in your family, and not getting some help to take care of that. Wait. Don't repeat your instructions over and over. And I hear this too. Do that. I said do that. Go do that now. I know it bugs you sometimes when kids says I'll do it in a minute. But if you're on them like that constantly, sometimes children just need some closure with what they're doing right now. It's mentally and emotionally important to them. And as long as they do it, that's what's important. Okay, and this was adapted from the work of Sarita Friedman, Center for Infant Parent Development in Woodland Hills, California. And that is all of our time for today. So I hope you found this educational, informational, or just entertaining. And I will leave a link in the description for you to donate to this educational mystery if you so choose to help me to continue to present these programs. I'm putting them out here for public knowledge. So, from 100 years from now, if somebody's on YouTube, if there's such a thing as YouTube in 100 years, they come across this, maybe it'll help them, and that's why I'm bothering to do this. I want to get this information out to the public while I still can. So until next time.